It sure was a hell of a thing to ring in the new year for me by receiving indications that Payday 3 was now fully set in the pipeline. A game that I would have been concerned about if there were no indications of information about it. But it seems that, with the year it's scheduled to release in well and truly here now, information about the third session of Clown Crimes set to hit New York might not be too far away. So with that in mind, I felt it was only appropriate to begin my 2023 video listings with a Payday video. Of course, we can't go to Payday 3, at least not yet, so we're just gonna have to do things old school with Payday 2 for the time being. Another thing that may be plainly obvious is that I play a lot of Smash Ultimate, and for a while during the DLC run, I was semi-jokingly wondering if the Payday gang would receive some Me Gunner costumes as DLC. After all, Payday 2 is on the Switch, so it wasn't entirely out of the realm of possibility. But as we all know by now, no dice there. So, if I couldn't bring Payday to Smash, I figured that I might as well do the next best thing and bring Smash to Payday, as I decided to make some builds based on several fighters in the game. I already kind of dipped my toes into this last year during my Deaths Equals Crime Spree video, where I cobbled together a build for Persona 5's Joker to tackle Crime Spree. With that build as a benchmark, it's time to see what else could be accomplished as we settle it in DC. However, it should be noted that not all budding Smash heisters are created equal. Straight away, the very nature of this challenge already provides a major issue. You see, Payday 2 is a very formulaic game, at least as far as builds are concerned. You have a primary weapon, a secondary weapon, a melee weapon, a throwable, a piece of equipment, and a perk deck, as well as a skill set that can be customized to your liking with a set number of skill points. Either way, it's a very gun-centric game by nature, with very few non-ballistic weapons in the game outside of the various melee weapons and several throwables. As such, this already rules out the possibility of translating fairly pacifist and non-fighter characters such as Isabelle, most brawler types such as Ryu, Ken, or Incineroar, and most other unconventional fighters such as the Ice Climbers, Rosalina, and pretty much every other Pokemon fighter, to say the least. There are some that are theoretically possible within the Payday 2 system, but I feel like a majority of them would wind up playing the same due to the way things are structured. There's only so much flexibility I can work with here. There could be a way to transition some characters into this format, but for now, I don't really see a way to bring the likes of Mario, Donkey Kong, or King Dedede into this game. A pity. So, in a game with 89 fighters, that includes Echoes by the way, the Payday 2 formatting requirement means that a good 68 characters can already be ruled out of this Smash Bros. The Heist format. If you think I'm wrong about any of them, feel free to let me know and tell me how I could go about them. But for now, this is what I have to work with. Despite the massive culling of roster space, however, all is not lost, as there are several characters in this game that have the means to be able to be replicated in a Payday 2 format. And as the title of this video suggests, one of the ones that can be recreated is one you probably wouldn't have fully expected. The hero of Hyrule himself, Link. It may sound bizarre when you think about it, but with at least 3 bows in the game and at least 2 swords, bringing Nintendo's perennial pot-smashing elf boy into the gritty world of Washington DC is actually feasible, as we'll be going into with today's video. The rules for engagement are fairly straightforward. I'll be playing on Crime Spree using my Link build in a bid to get as far as possible. Joker's rank of 210 from last year is the benchmark, even though I could imagine that build could go much further if I could be bothered to give it another try. The build will only consist of weapons that the character in question uses either in Smash or within their series. Anything not capable of being translated from their series is not allowed. I'll be bringing AI crewmates along to help me fulfill the Heist Rule Warriors motif since, well, it's dangerous to go alone, even if our trusty Link doesn't quite understand the concept of firearms. I will limit myself to 1 reroll per mission select. After that, I have to pick my destiny no matter how bad the options look. And I will assign myself 3 stocks, or failures in this case. Once I've failed the crime spree 3 times, that's it. The only reason I won't lose a stock is if, in true Smash Bros. Fashion, a crash causes me to be thrown out of the game and thus the crime spree. I mean, Payday 2 is a nearly 10-year-old game on an ancient engine at this point, so we can't really rule that possibility out. Anyway, it's time to show off the build and prepare ourselves against the faces of evil. As you can see here, Hoxton is dressed up to play the part of Link with less than stellar results. I guess this iteration of the Hero of Time needed to blend in a bit with the locals now that he's been mysteriously transported from Hyrule to Washington DC. But old habits die hard, and after donning some era-appropriate garbs, he needs to gear up with the tools that he knows by heart. So, let's show off what we're giving ourselves for the crime spree run. In the primary slot, I'll be running the Planesrider bow modded only with a concealment boost to rep Link's trusty bow. You could run the English longbow or the Deka compound bow as alternatives, but the speedy and simplistic nature of the Planesrider will do us just fine. While I'll be running regular arrows for this build, it's entirely possible to use the explosive arrows on each bow to represent the bomb arrows. In the secondary slot, I was originally going to run a full concealment Gruber Curse that we simply wouldn't use to keep concealment low, but it turns out that there was an aspect of Link that I almost completely forgot about. He had crossbow training. Yep, turns out this Wii Zappa tech demo allows Link to bring a secondary weapon into battle, where he managed to MacGyver one of these weird gun thingos he found into a pistol crossbow, rocking explosive bolts to rep the aforementioned bomb arrows, the skeletal limb, a concealment boost, the camo grip, and the Scald Reflex micro sight. Stick to what you know, Link. For my melee weapon, I opted for the Greatsword. Any Payday player worth their salt would argue that it would be a better investment to use the Shinsakuto Katana, having the same damage but faster swing speed. And in any other situation, they'd be right to say so. But for the Master Sword, the Greatsword is pretty much the best choice for the task, so we're gonna roll with it. Plus, this build doesn't have a terribly big focus on melee in the first place, since our bow is going to be our primary weapon, so we don't necessarily need our melee to be fast acting. We just need our budget Master Sword to pack a punch against the beefier enemies when we need it most. And as part of the melee weapons that can deal 70 damage uncharged to 450 when fully charged, this thing will do just fine, especially when we give it skills to bolster its effectiveness. We don't exactly have cartoon bombs for our throwables, at least not like what we've seen, but the dynamite is the long skinny cousin of the cartoon bomb, so we'll utilize them as our throwable to sub in for Link's bombs. For our deployable, we'll be rocking first aid kits as a substitute for the Water of Life, Fairy Bottle, or other such healing elements that Link can use. But if you're feeling more like a Mad Bomber Link, it's entirely possible to utilize Trip Mines and Shape Charges to rep Breath of the Wild's remote bombs. It ultimately depends on your playstyle, but for this video, I'll be using first aid kits for a survival mentality. For the perk deck, we'll be utilizing the ever-handy Crook perk deck, and likewise, we'll be rocking the lightweight ballistic vest for our armor to help represent the armor pieces that Breath of the Wild has. The reason being is that, in the case of the bows and grenades, explosions don't exactly discriminate with its damage. They'll gladly damage the police, but they'll also damage you. So, having a bit of protection while having some high mobility and dodge chance will be important to help our Hero of Time through the modern age. And as for skills, I've invested as much as the infamous 5 limit will let me get to get the most out of our kit. In Mastermind, I picked up Combat Medic and Quick Fix as well as Uppers Aced in the Medic branch to get our First Aid Kit skills, and Forced Friendship as well as acing every other skill in the Controller branch save for Stockholm Syndrome. Having jokers around will help our mobility and survivability, and besides, Link seems charismatic enough despite his selective muteness that he could persuade some of the law enforcers going against him to turn around and help him out instead. In Enforcer, I only went into the tank branch for the skills I needed to boost survivability, those being Resilience aced before picking up Transporter, Die Hard and Shock and Awe, as well as acing Bullseye. This will further help survivability while also helping armor regen through the use of headshots, as well as better transportation of bags, which is always handy in a bag moving simulator like this. Technician is a fairly brief overview here, only picking up Hardware Expert Basic and Drill Sergeant Aced. Cutting down on drill time is also a fairly useful thing in this game, and these skills are key to that. Even though Link hasn't really seen technology like this, at least not that I know of, let's just assume that he's an instant expert when it comes to the drills, saws and computers that he'll have to interact with. I mean, hey, Ganon managed to make use of an entire technological control room in Brawl, so it's not that big a stretch. In Ghost, I picked up Chameleon Basic and Sixth Sense Aced in the Shinobi branch to make any stealth ventures that bit easier, Duck and Cover and Parkour in the Artful Dodger branch for mobility, and then investing points into the Silent Killer branch with Second Wind, Optical Illusions, and High Value Target, as well as Low Blow Aced. With our current setup, we have a maximum base concealment value of 10, more than enough to make most stealth heists doable, and more than enough to get the maximum 30% crit chance. And it also gives us some wriggle room later on in the crime spree when it introduces concealment modifiers. With that, there's only fugitive skills left, with me picking up 9 lives aced in the Revenant branch, and then investing my remaining points into martial arts and bloodthirst, as well as combat training and Counter-Strike aced. These are all to make the moments where we utilize our sword all the more effective, boosting its damaging potential. More than enough to offset its painfully slow swing speed, and allow us to maybe channel some Z-targeting ability when it comes to dealing with those pesky cloakers. Before we get started, I would like to say I'm very grateful to everyone who subbed in 2022, but I would very much appreciate if you watch my videos frequently and you haven't subscribed to me, that you do so. This year I'm hoping to reach a goal of 1,000 subscribers, and hopefully with your help I can make it there. Anyway, with all of that said and done, it's time to begin the challenge and send Link on his quest to get one over on the fearsome Commissioner Garrettdorf. With Link here having acquainted himself well in his new urban surroundings, it's time to embark on the first quest of the run. The choices on startup were not terrible, I'll admit, but Transport Harbor and Undercover both put me at risk of snipers, and I wasn't really willing to test my luck against Bulbins and Bokoblins with high-power rifles from the word go, so I decided to start with the FBI server mission from Firestarter. Infiltrating and locating the server room door was easy enough, and I actually got lucky with the computer access point right next to me, which Link somehow managed to breeze through, despite having never canonically seen a computer in his life. However, the power box luck was something I wasn't so lucky with, as one of them was right next to the guard manning the front desk, and my effort to kill him without setting off the nearby camera led me to fall victim to the classic stealth domino effect and brought the heist into Loud after this guard broke all manners of protocol and fired relentlessly upon me, needing me to drill the security barrier too. Oh well, a setback, but not a failure. Link is a mastermind in his own right after all, and if I fell flat, it was time to adapt. With both the door and the server barrier needing drilling, this is a good opportunity to say that this build is deceptively powerful, if you couldn't tell with how long the video is. With me bringing medieval era weaponry against the DC police force armed with guns and technology and all sorts of modern tactical stuff, I thought that the Plains Rider would struggle in this challenge. And truthfully, it was a struggle to use it at long range when trying to hit those pesky snipers, with me not knowing how the bow's arc worked most of the time. But when it came to close and medium range firefights, the Plains Rider not only held its own, but it was capable of laying down some serious hurt and prevented me from getting completely swamped by crowds of cops for most of the run. With 1000 base damage combined with the headshot multiplier and the possibility of crits on top of that, a well-placed headshot is capable of killing pretty much any reoccurring enemy except for bulldozers. And even then, if you get lucky with crits and land those shots on the faceplate, even they can go down in as little as 2 arrows thanks to this build. With this bow, building up bloodthirst charges for the great sword to use for if a dozer needed quick killing was pretty easy, and the pistol crossbow could just be used for crowd control, shields, and dozer faceplates. Not quite sure if the thing being able to crit with explosive bolts is an oversight or not, but hey, I'm not going to complain about getting some mileage out of this utility option. With the assault ending as the barrier drill finished, there was only one last thing to deal with as I made my escape. The first sniper of the run. It went rather painlessly actually, only needing 2 arrow shots to take him down before he could land a shot on me. Despite the mad scramble at the end, the crime spree began with what was effectively a roaring success. The next few heists on offer were definitely tempting in their own ways, but I decided that the breakout was probably the most rewarding one to do this early into the crime spree. After going medieval on the prison guards and the first responders with the Master Sword, it was here that the bow really started to make its mark. As opposed to the closed-in, claustrophobic corridors of the FBI building, the wide expanses of the streets combined with the hordes of enemies gave for good stomping grounds for my bow aim, which was surprisingly on point for this challenge. The scripted sniper ended up being counter-sniped so hard with my arrow that it apparently caused me to receive recoil damage, but other than that, the run to the underground car park was pretty straightforward, despite me getting the bad luck of the SWAT van blockade. Once inside, a few door lockpicks saw me come across my first little mini-boss in the form of the control room dozer, who was hacked with the Master Sword, and the rest of the mission was a cinch, leaving the heist with some fresh confidence about my bow marksmanship. Onwards and upwards, Transport Park is a fairly straightforward mission that I could romp through without the threat of snipers hanging over me. The heist started off with me converting a Gensec driver to the Hylian cause, and having a bit of a walking standoff with another who didn't seem too interested in joining my side. Bummer. Oh well, there were plenty of more worthy candidates for Joker converts anyway. I ended up getting decent RNG with money being the loot of choice here, and after arrowing several more coppers in my wait for the escape to pop up, I started to juggle 2 of the 5 money bags towards the van. The shields around the van area did give me a little bit of trouble, but nothing that the bow and explosive crossbow couldn't handle. A simple clear for Link in the end. From here, the first modifier had to be chosen, and I naturally went with the Cloak of Smoke Bomb one, which I felt wouldn't be too intrusive. From there, I managed to jump into Cook-Off to make some more headway. After a scramble to find the 5 sets of boards, the cooking process was slow but steady. I managed to complete the first set of meth after I almost got sandwiched with Clover between 2 shields, the second one soon after, and the third before the 10-minute mark as an assault came to an end. And just so that we're aware here, this heist is dark, without a light source to guide your way, which the bow and pistol crossbow doesn't have. Not because I didn't dare to bring light to this lair, but because I simply couldn't. In fact, this heist convinced me to up the contrast on my computer monitor just so that I could actually see what I was doing. So, yes, cook-off footage during this video will look too dark. No, there's nothing I can do about it. There's only so much that a tug of war on the power boxes with these cops will do there. From there, I managed to secure all 3 bags of the Sky Blue and made it out in under 13 minutes. Not bad cooking there, Link, even if you've never had to cook meth before. Perhaps he was able to watch a season or 2 of Breaking Bad before his quest. After picking the 10 civilian alarm stealth modifier, I decided to hop back into the breakout. This run went about the same as the first. Decent objective RNG, nice open spaces to fling arrows into helmets, and this sniper bossed by arrows. However, when it came to the control room, a green dozer came out of the lifts as I was picking the lock to what would eventually turn out to be the control room. And then the black dozer inside decided to tag team with his mate and perform the twin rover takedown to wipe out my health instantly with a 1-2 shotgun combo, marking the first time I went down in the crime spree. I took the green dozer out with an errant dynamite toss before breaking the faceplate of the black dozer and running him through with the master sword. An annoying encounter, but I got my revenge and escaped with a clear conscience. With me picking a medic cooldown modifier, I decided to roll with a first world bank run with the aim to do it stealthily. It started off well enough, getting the key card and subduing the manager and all of his buddies in the meeting room, and managing to get 2 or 3 power boxes. But on the way to the third, I got caught out by another stealth classic in Payday 2, the unexpected guard U-turn. It didn't help that I wasn't able to get into cover in time due to Link's classic nemesis, a plant pot. The guard saw me, and me arrowing him in revenge was caught in 4K by his pal on the cameras, so much for the sneaky approach. I knew I had to be vigilant during this heist in Loud due to the plethora of sniper locations. However, I seemed to get rather lucky as I took out 2 snipers during the drill section, and apparently the third was just in a weird rooftop angle, so as long as I didn't venture too far out from the drill area, I wouldn't get sniped by him. Once in the vault, I ran one of the scripted dozers through with my sword before getting the loot out to the vent. By the time all of the bags were inside, the assault was over, so I knew I'd have minimal resistance running through the lobby to the escape point, even under the watchful eye of the sniper I kept alive earlier. Escape was clean, and the dozer I ran into before securing the bags was definitely not ready for a green-clad maniac with a sword to stab him to death through his bomb suit. His twin brother did seem to arrive to try and avenge him, but by that point, I'd secured all the bags and my escape was inevitable. That marked the first forced modifier milestone, and another stealth modifier, which I selected to be the 7th civil arm this time. My options here didn't look particularly enticing, so I decided to re-roll them. This didn't really work as much as I'd hoped, so I decided to bite the bullet on Hoxton's revenge in hopes that I could get through silently. It was anything but silent. A guard spotted me through a window and it all just seemed to collapse from there. This was a problem to say the least, because this heist is riddled with sniper locations that would tear me a new one if I wasn't careful. Or at least it would be a major problem if I didn't get this particular spawn for the panic room, which I could rectify with just a set of boards, guaranteeing one way in and out of the room for some easy defense. But Loud Hoxton revenge was never going to be easy. The snipers were beginning to spawn in even before the drill had arrived, so I was going to need to deal with them when it was time to go get it. The SWAT van turret parked outside didn't make things any easier, but I was able to recover the drill and just about wriggled in through the window before another sniper could lodge a round into my cranium. That was about the hard part of the heist over, with the rest of the timer on the drill being spent defending the choke point I had created with my earlier prep, alongside my compatriots. Hector was then finished off with a dynamite blast and 2 arrows lodged into his helmet for good measure for a clean 0 to death. From there it was just a waiting game, and thankfully Bile decided to be generous and come near the panic room's location. So all I had to do was break my boards, pack the 6 pieces of evidence, and escape in this weird helicopter thing. Definitely more high-tech than a hand glider. With that heist done, I took a much needed break to both get some food into my system and to plot my next move. None of my heists from here looked enticing in terms of avoiding snipers, but the reroll gave me a Brooklyn bank, which was definitely doable. But I had the winch as my breaching tool, which is not really what I'd prefer due to having to retrieve the bags in the open where I'm vulnerable to snipers and others taking pot shots at me. After a bit of confusion as to why this winch bag wasn't in the winch zone according to the game, it was just a whole lot of back and forth with the power until I eventually managed to breach the vault, grab the medallion, and leave via the sewers. From here, I decided to bite the bullet on shields reflecting projectiles, something I'd usually select earlier if I was just running regular guns, before making the decision to get my revenge on First World Bank and attempt another stealth run. This encore went a lot smoother than last time. I got the 2 bank power boxes taken care of before I startled myself as I suddenly ran into the manager on the balcony overlooking the lobby, who I apparently didn't see when I walked into the bank. I guess I needed the Triforce of Wisdom if I missed him that easily. Still, I got his keycard, disabled the metal detectors, and even got the vault code from the first computer I checked. Clearly Link is a hidden tech savant in this modern age. I thought the stealth run was going to come to a crashing halt when this guard caught me on the way over to the vault after either passing by 2 others or pulling the fastest 180 I've ever seen. But nobody came up doing the pager response to trigger another domino effect. With a sigh of relief, I pressed on into the vault, systematically dealing with the camera operator and all of the guards in the area to free up the vault area entirely, letting me plunder the strangely flat paper rupees unopposed. With that, it was time to make my escape, and I don't quite know how this beat cop opening fire on me after I skewered his buddy didn't alert the entire bank to the fact that a bow-wielding elf had just infiltrated the place. But I was able to silence him, subdue most of the alerted civs in the office, and escape in stealth. Somehow. Next, I moved on to the Diamond, a heist that I find fun to stealth, if only because the loud version of this heist is a bit of a meat grinder. And then this happened. Okay, this is awkward, but not the end of the world. As long as I showed a little guile, Oh, there's another civ to get down. Alright, not a problem I guess, I just need to... Oh, that's another guard. Yeah, this was bad. With only 1 body bag to carry with me, there was no way I was going to clean this mess up quickly. I did have the body bag asset in the renovated World War II exhibit to at least make cleanup possible, but that wasn't going to make things much easier. But I decided not to work on that until I knew I wouldn't have to worry about the cameras spotting my work. So, to try and spin things in my favour, I dominated the camera operator and was prepared to go clean up my mess downstairs now that no camera would spot what I was doing, and oh god damn it. I was a little fortunate that the bow shot I let out here propelled the body just out of sight of the guard on the other end of the hall, buying me just a little bit more time, but... yeah, now I was in a real predicament. With no pages left and desperate to clean up my tracks, I decided to do some fast runs back and forth with the body bag asset and rush to bag the bodies and move the civs away from the open. A bright plan, but it was to no avail, as a 5th guard spotted me moving one of the curators towards a storage room, and that just about killed the stealth run. Classic Payday 2 stealth dominoes in full force there. Letting my AI buddies handle the heavy lifting as I brute forced my way into the vault, it was time for some puzzles. And by puzzles I mean memorizing the tile pattern in the Vault of the Diamond. Still, this sort of thing is Link's forte, so I decided to give the crossing a go. Not the first one, of course, since that was a bit too complex for my tiny mind, but the second layout certainly looked doable. Unfortunately, I forgot to carry a wand somewhere towards the end as I'd stepped on a wrong tile and activated the gas. Still, I got the diamond anyway, managed to squirm my way through the army waiting for me, and even made this medic's neck spring up like a giraffe when I shot him in the head point blank with an arrow. Brutal. With that, the diamond was conquered. This gave me the ability to pick a loud and a stealth modifier, which I picked the Tasem, Knockout, and Concealment modifiers respectively, before moving on to the Search, always a good one to knock out for an easy-ish 15 crime spree rank, and where Joker was able to retire from his first crime spree run last year. The heist went rather well, analysing evidence, getting the encryption keys and approving files in the director's office, all while sharpening my bow aiming skills and popping helmets left and right. I went down a few times, but nothing I couldn't handle as I escaped the building with the server on my back. This brought me to rank 100 in Crime Spree, and with it, I got to select another loud modifier, bringing 2 more medics into the fray, before deciding to tackle Car Shop. Always a risk if you don't know your stealth skills, but this is far from my first rodeo. After a little tango with this guard by the back stairwell, getting into the car shop via the rooftop was easy. I enjoyed watching this guard get robbed by faulty technology, and quenched some of Link's insatiable thirst for smashing plant pots to get revenge on the loud First World Bank run, before finding the manager in his office and taking him out with a well-aimed arrow. I know civ deaths aren't exactly in the hero of time's nature, but sometimes liberties have to be taken to ensure a win. Especially when civ paving, when trying to move them around, simply decides to not cooperate with you. After that, it was easy enough to hack the correct computer, set up the C4, and make a hasty but comfortable getaway. Link's Mario Kart knowledge is surely the only reason he was able to handle the Falco Genie at all, despite there being no cars in Hyrule. With that, I decided to get another concealment modifier and go for round 2 in Brooklyn Bank, and this was infinitely smoother than the previous one. This time I got the thermal drill, which I prefer for this mission, and defending the objective was easy enough this time around. Nothing really of note happened during this heist. It was quick, it was well executed, and I was able to grab the medallion once again, and slink back into the sewers in just over 7 minutes. A nice speedy Brooklyn Bank run. With 113 ranks gained, over halfway towards Joker's benchmark from last year, I decided to make the executive decision to call it a day, and let Link rest after a long day of heisting. The next day, I was feeling refreshed, and so was Link, even swapping out his white gloves for something a bit more practical for the heavy-duty work that lay ahead. Looking at the options I left on, I wasn't keen on any of them due to the aforementioned sniper issue, so I re-rolled them. I didn't get terribly lucky with any of the re-rolled selections, but I figured Shacklethorn Auction would be an interesting enough challenge to take on. I hadn't played this heist for a while, and it clearly showed in my attempts to stealth it, being forced into awkward positions due to the guard patrols and waiting for the locations of the power boxes to show up, which they did, on the ground floor where all the civilians were. Despite this, I was eventually able to work my way down to the hall, start the hack on one power box before taking out the camera guard in a bid to make things easier. But that was always a doomed effort, as on the path to work my way around to get to the second box, a guard on the upper level caught me and I didn't have a body bag to spare. Though, thankfully his mate didn't seem to notice that the guy he was patrolling with was suddenly gone. I then ran into another guard on the stairwell, and then another guard spotted the mess I was making upstairs, meaning all of my pages were wasted, and it was now a race against time and the claustrophobic layout of this mansion. And with me getting caught out in the vault area soon afterwards, that was a race I was simply never going to win. Well, I'll work out how this heist works again some other time. I definitely needed it, as I was even getting lost trying to work out where the hell the office was. But, thankfully, I was able to use the keycard to brute force my way in, and was able to hold the office down, in part thanks to the explosive bolts in my pistol crossbow, which helped weaken the masses of police funneling into the office, and breaking doors of faceplates for quick arrow kills. With me and my pals able to hold the line, I was able to get the code and head down to the vault before skewering several more heads with arrows as I waited on the time lock. Obtaining the obsidian plate, it was just a matter of waiting for the escape. The final holdout by this balcony showed that something about loud Shacklethorn must have done something to increase the spawn rate or something like that, as there was a relentless wave of cops during the assault that even me and 2 of my AI crewmates found ourselves overwhelmed with. As if showing mercy on me though, Bile showed up on the side I was holding out on soon afterwards, and I was able to secure the plate and escape, even with Clover and Duke bleeding out back in the mansion. No worries though. I'll be back for the next one. With me deciding to replace FBI SWATs with heavy SWATs, I re-rolled the missions I had and found that I had some pretty interesting options, but ultimately decided to tackle Framing Frame Day 3. It went decently to start with, finding all 5 items in just over 2 minutes and getting them up to the roof. But it was the office computer access part that ultimately did me in for stealth, as I got caught by this guard who just so happened to be in the office at the time. And it would have been completely salvageable had the camera that spotted him not existed in the office to get a nice, clean view of him being dominated and cuffed. Sure, I had the foresight to unlock the server room with a keycard during my item search and claim the unfortunate guard as one of my converts, but this heist was going to be rough. They were not terribly far away from one another, but one of them was on the roof, which in itself is a problem with how vulnerable I can be up there. I could already tell this was going to be a colossal pain in the neck when I had this horde of TAN units physically body block me from passing through this doorway, leading to the second of many power shutdowns. My first aid kits, barely tapped into in the previous heists up to this point, were being called upon a lot in the early stages due to the rapid stream of police in the tight corridors, ripping my armor and health to shreds quickly. As is always the case with loud framing frame day 3, this was just a colossal time waster, with the stairway being a dark place of death from all the cops squashed inside, and constant battles to keep the power up if I strayed so much as 2 meters away from the power box I was guarding. After several minutes of this and some systematic killing of the medic population, the upload was complete, allowing me to escape after over 13 minutes of pain and suffering. This was definitely the toughest challenge Link had faced by far, but given that politicians were involved here, that was to be expected. Afterwards, I decided to pick Prison Nightmare, which thankfully didn't require as much time and blood as Framing Frame Day 3. Being inside the prison didn't make the cops less relentless, as I needed constant arrow headshots to keep myself afloat. After a smoky second wheel, which for some reason didn't seem to feel like punishing me with whatever would have occurred with the question marks, I got the second keycard, boarded the train, and managed to flawlessly sprint my way to the end without getting shot down. Small mercies indeed. With that, I needed to say goodbye to one of my pages and, coincidentally, try my hand at a shadow raid. Despite people's thoughts on stealth-only heists sometimes, I actually really enjoy this one and always seem to run it when I want a nice little loot gathering challenge. The inside section closest to the vault provided good hauls already, with 3 bags of coke, a weapon stash and a money bag in one of the offices to already put me halfway there without having to go into the warehouse itself. Then, the game decided to put on a sick sense of humor by giving me an artifact to lug around. Splendid. After that, I encountered a gold cache, which put me up to 7 bags. But with a murky frozen in the middle of the warehouse near the stairs, the idea of me searching the last 2 boxes was out of the question. This was where I formulated a plan. I'd secure the 7 bags I'd already recovered, before going around into the back end of the courtyard by the waterfront, find 2 money bags and containers, then secure them via the zipline and GTFO. With the reveal that the incoming helicopter had a surplus of guards, this plan was definitely doubled down on. To make life easier on myself, I decided to dominate this guard enjoying a smoke by the corner, before making my way into the back of the courtyard. Thankfully, the first 2 containers I searched had the money bags I needed, so I was able to secure them with the corner guard powerless to stop me, and left without any bloodshed. Who says Link can't be stealthy? My pacifist shadow raid run was rewarded with another go on the search. My strategy remained the same, turtle the initial onslaught of the extreme glass cannons that were the FBI agents, before just grinding out the defenses of the power box and getting the objectives done quickly. Oh, and take a look at this moment. I know Payday 2 banisters have magical reflective properties when it comes to things like arrows and throwing knives, but I'm still not entirely sure how I managed to catch a shield with that trick shot. It never even registered to me that I even saw the hit marker for that arrow until watching the footage back. So, hey, there's a highlight to show off from here. I was able to get the server to the door to escape and, oh. Apparently with me getting a little too into the role, I had forgotten a keycard for the escape, and I knew there was at least one in the operations room. A little embarrassed at this blunder, I quickly ran back up to scour the room for the keycard, and just as quickly got back down to finish the job. Not a smooth finish, but a smooth showing overall. The options from here were bad. And the reroll didn't provide much leeway either, so I had to take a bit of a gamble with Swing Vote, the second day of Election Day. I got off to the worst possible start when I set off a pretty nasty chain reaction, sloppily alerting these twins and a beat cop nearby as well. Mercifully, I had just enough time to answer both pages before beginning the mad scramble to clean up the mess I left behind. Eventually, I was able to stabilize things a little by getting the camera operator and hiding him in a couple rooms away where he wouldn't be seen by any roaming guards, especially if he's shoving his head through a filing cabinet. This wouldn't be the end of my bad luck though, as when I was partway through hacking the first machine, a guard happened to spot it before it had finished. With that, I would have no more pages or body bags, and I still had 5 machines to go. With that, it was time to do some desperate brute forcing. To say this was tense was an understatement. With how long the final objective was combined with the sniper coverage, I couldn't really afford to go loud here. But on looking the footage back, the earlier goof at the beginning might have actually helped in the long run. With 2 of the bottom roaming guards gone, the bottom of the map was freed up significantly, using all the keycards I could find to get as many machines in the side rooms as I could with minimal resistance. Against all the odds, I was able to finish this heist in stealth and booked it out of the open gates to safety. That could have gone much worse. I was tempted to do another cook-off to test how strong the enemies were at this stage, but decided to try something a little less demanding. And Bank Heist was perfect for this test. With the vault at the front of the bank, doing this quietly was always going to be an uphill task, meaning I'd need to do some crowd control during the drilling. But the aforementioned plan for this heist went off well, even managing to catch the bank manager on the roof staring out into space. With all of the guards picked off or domed out of sight, including this one who I had the good luck of encountering in this little safe space, it was time to do some ace marksmanship by skewering the remaining cameras around the bank, even having the foresight to take out the one outside in case the guy on the bench got alerted. Now, I needed to kill the tellers before I could get to work here. I don't know what it is about these two, but it seems to be impossible without Stockholm Syndrome Basic to make them get down before they press the alarm buttons directly in front of them. As long as more than 4 civs didn't bite it, all would be well. Despite the mad scramble with all of the civilians in the bank getting alerted, I was able to move the more problematic civs into the bank, shouting "Hey listen" at the remaining untied, and managed to eventually breach the vault, grab a money bag, and ghost on out of there. Not quite the loud challenge I had expected. With that, I gifted cloakers the ability to drop tear gas on death before I decided to make a bold call. I went on to Lion's Den, day 1 of the biker heist. This wasn't a call I took lightly, but figured that I'd be able to get through, with me taking out snipers and medics, and my AI and converts tackling the rest. That suggestion wasn't entirely accurate, with the large swarms of police starting to overwhelm me without contingencies. With the engine already secured, I rolled the problematic special parts objective, tempered only by the mechanic's positioning. With how much damage enemies were starting to do to me, it was pretty clear that this was the point in the crime spree where they were pretty much telling me that I wasn't going to get away with stuff for free anymore. The final objective was the Chrome Skull, and as I prepared to go up there, I got completely obliterated by the snipers that were starting to spawn in. This was going to get hairy. The wait for the drill itself went by with little incident, with the only pressure coming from these double dozers after the drill was done. But I knew it was going to be the return to the mechanic that had proved to be an issue. The special parts objective really wasn't helping, since it was helping the cops attack me from 2 different angles. But the bike was eventually finished, and after scouting ahead to make sure I wasn't about to be ambushed by snipers, I made like the bandit and rode out with Rust's bike. It's just as well that Breath of the Wild introduced the Master Cycle, which I would imagine helped Link get accustomed to riding a Harley Davidson. Next on the agenda was another Framing Frame Day 3. This time, I hoped, would be stealthed, now that there was no sneaky office cam to trip me up. I managed to find all of the items again, only to be met with this moonwalking guard who I had to dispose of on the stairwell. Then, when I went to get access to the office computer, I got hit with deja vu as I got caught again. This time around though, there were no cameras to watch me fling the body out of the line of the door, but this would prove to be a problem. I had no more body bags, so wherever the vault was, I needed to work fast. But RNG was not kind to me on that front either, as it rolled the Epicenter vault, objectively the worst vault you can get on this heist. This then culminated in me trying to salvage the situation with the loot shortcut, only for the bags to get spotted by the camera that was there. Navi was strangely quiet about that one. I know it isn't clear in the footage, but I actually got really lucky this time, with one power box being on the far side of the main room, and the other literally around the corner in the kitchen, with my AI handling the main room box and the kitchen box being defended by me and my converts. This was going much smoother than the first round, with both boxes in arm's reach of each other. Keeping on top of the assault was simple, with the boxes only being shut off a few times total. With what I believe to be one of the most successful loud framing frame day 3s I've been a part of done, I got out cleanly, but not before handing a few of my cohorts some bags of the good stuff. Not let it go to waste and whatnot. The next job I'd go on to would be a fast and quick interception from the biker heist. A fast romp on a moving train seems right up Link's alley, and the bow was once again putting in work with skewering everything in its path. With the biker boss at the end of the train slain, whose head I'm pretty sure is now more arrow than flesh and bone, I was able to get this weird piece of technology known as the BCI helmet, and got a convert on my side for the sprint back to the chopper. I think I got about halfway back before the surge of opponents was too much and I got bulldozed for my troubles. But one revive and a few clutch first aid kits later, I was able to make my way out in just under 2.5 minutes. After adding more bulldozers into the crime spree stew, I decided it was time for an encore of Transport Park. Despite getting initially overwhelmed, this mission was fairly run-of-the-mill, rolling jewelry for my loot, which meant I could sprint with it and therefore get out quicker. Special mention goes to these tan units, who I headshotted with arrows so hard that they got sucked into the ceiling and sides of the armoured van, leaving quite the impression on Link. It's safe to say that they definitely met with a terrible fate. I wasn't able to dwell on it too long though, as I quickly moved to secure the 5 bags and move on. Now I needed to say goodbye to a second pager, but I wouldn't be making use of it as I decided to try my hand at undercover. This may be Sniper Central, but as long as I boarded up the important parts during the prep phase, I wouldn't have to deal with them much, if at all. Alex decided to drop the limo onto the balcony, which at least was more defendable than the open rooftop. In fact, aside from the claustrophobic space inside the building, the only threat that could actually kill me at this point in the heist is the boredom of getting the taxman to the ground floor, as cops kept rappelling onto his position every 2 seconds in the stairway. Eventually, the taxman was brought into his makeshift interrogation chamber, and the hack, and some gratuitous torture, could begin. The only real threat from this part of the mission came from the second phase of the hack, when the power box I needed to flip the switch of was on the roof, meaning I'd be exposed to the snipers I'd been trying to avoid. After that, despite the large swarms of cops threatening to overwhelm me and put me into custody, I was able to complete the hack, forge a path through the assault, and slip out via the rooftops, $25 million richer. This gave me the confidence to go for a second run on the interception. It went well last time, so what's the worst that could happen? Well, let's just say it went badly through no fault of my own. I was able to make it to the biker boss, but I guess a bulldozer had followed me all the way across the train, as I was tag-teamed by the 2 and downed. No problem, just wait for my crew to revive me and... wait, why were they not here? Why were they all the way over there? Yeah, for some reason my crew AI had decided to freeze on this railcar, too distracted by the moving SWAT turret van to pay any heed to my demise. Of all of the ways to lose my first stock, I was a little disappointed that a technical flub from the diesel engine was the way it happened. I don't know why the AI crewmates do this on this particular day sometimes. Dismayed but undeterred, I sought to get back into the interception quickly, this time making sure that my colleagues would actually follow me this time. With a convert on my side heading for the rematch with the biker boss, I was quickly put back into my place for trying to bring some feathery sticks and a sword to a gunfight. But at least Clover, my personal Zelda, was on hand to help me get back up, inspiring me to give the boss a nice meaty backstab. With that accomplished, I was able to grab the BCI helmet and make a run back to Bile, with a well-timed run and a few sticks of dynamite to help clear the way. I was even able to hit someone with an arrow just before the heist ended to add to the kill count. On the verge of 200 ranks of Crime Spree, I decided to go for Highland Mortuary for an interesting challenge. If I got lucky, I'd be able to escape before the snipers became a problem. Mr. Pink decided to park himself in the parking lot, which wasn't too terrible, and I was able to get him back with only a few interruptions. Definitely an improvement over the Taxman. It was the sawing part that started to get tricky though. If you find the diamonds quickly, then it's no problem. But it took 3 saws to find them, which gave the snipers ample time to spawn and start causing me issues. Eventually, third time was the charm and I was able to get a bag to Mr. Blonde before being able to cross the street and escape, in spite of all of the red lasers pointing towards me. Incidentally, the heist selection gave me a third crack at the whip on interception to let me equal that record. This cloaker deserves an honourable mention for managing to kick me down at what I can only assume to be light speed, completely no-selling the arrow that was lodged halfway through his upper torso via his shoulder. There was even a moment where I could do this little Zelda gag thanks to the locked door. I was facing pretty heavy resistance without having even breached the front rail car, but was able to remedy that by taking the biker boss down with only 2 stabs of the Master Sword. Despite me going grey a couple of dozen meters away from freedom, I was able to shake off the tension, take out the sniper before he could take me out, and got out of dodge. Just. With that, I was on rank 210, where I left Joker last time. My reward for equaling that record was the removal of another pager, meaning I'd only have 1 safety net and stealth. At least body bags wouldn't be an issue anymore. Rolling my heists, I had the chance for a bomb dockyard run. This heist does require a fair bit of legwork in solo, but as long as you're vigilant about patrols on this map, which are more formulaic than usual, it's generally not too big an issue. I was able to find keycard 1 in just under a minute, even finding the radio to call the captain later. Then on the other side I found keycard 2, the comm frequencies, and the computer, and began the back and forth between sides to get to the radio and then the computer, which went off without a hitch. With the Moretta moving, I got into position at the gate and was able to take a break to get some food, even coming back as the gates opened to get at the bomb. It was simple, it was clean, and I was able to secure the parts of the boat without having even killed anyone. From the dockyard to the forest was the next port of call as I decided to tackle White Christmas next. A simple heist if your goal is to just get out fast. The assault on this heist could prove tricky, but I had a secret plan to try and help with this. Inside the presents there can be bags of coke, and since cops can prioritize claiming loot bags at times, I could use that to my advantage by throwing them around and hoping to distract a few enemies into taking them around the map. This had mixed results. They could go for the bags, but since I only had so many to work with as additional presents don't appear until after Vlad's brother-in-law was secured, they were still all mostly focused on me. It didn't help that I didn't get lucky with the initial chopper location and had to escort the pilot to the wrecked plane. Despite me turning this bulldozer into a pincushion, I was still downed and was now grey. I was having to be forced on the defensive, having to hold out for several minutes without a reliable safety net, and only my first aid kits to prevent a second failure. Having my escape be at the antenna was a little worrisome, but without a sniper already there to pick me off, I was able to squeak out of this heist with my tail between my legs. With the no staggering modifier now added, I decided to re-roll my options. Since I hated lab rats with a passion and my build was ill-suited for train transport, Beneath the Mountain was my next go-to, if only due to being the only one I could feasibly do without tearing my hair out. Getting 2 murky converts at the beginning was helpful for the initial push into the facility, in which I'd somehow managed to sprint past the spawning turret and avoid it altogether as a result, making the first part trivial. The second part began just as well, with me pulling some long-range snipes on this bulldozer and regaining my converts for the hacking process. A little bit of pressuring came along, but I was able to eventually open the Chronos and Demeter vaults, get the artifact and masterpiece up to the zipline, and restock my dynamite for the final third of the heist ahead. Locke was at least courteous enough to provide even more dynamite for me to use, which I knew would be handy as I had to deal with snipers. It was never preferable to do so with just a bow, but it was tempered by the helicopter being at the back of the facility, meaning the only sniper that would pose a credible threat was this one behind this fence that I could easily hit. The Murkies ultimately didn't provide too big a threat, and I was able to successfully hold out and escape beneath the mountain with only a slight amount of difficulty. With that, I had to select my final stealth modifier and cut pages out of my diet altogether, and I decided that it was time for round 3 on the breakout. I learned through scouting ahead that my very first objective was the SWAT van, so it wasn't looking promising. Thankfully, once I got into the garage, it was easy enough to make it out in spite of the attempts to get rid of my remaining downs. It was here that I had to make some pretty hard choices when it came to loud modifiers. They'd all give me trouble if I didn't prepare myself. I decided to bite the bullet on the medic revive damaging modifier, and not wanting to take chances, I decided to reroll my options. Considering my best option was taking it back to where the spree began at the FBI building, you could tell that my reroll wasn't that great, but I'd just have to work with it. I knew it was effectively going to be impossible to get through this stealthily, at least fully stealthily, but as long as I got the 2 wires cut on the alarm boxes, I wouldn't have to wait so long on the drilling. Locating the server room and getting another close computer, I think the same one from the very first mission, I was able to learn the locations of the alarm boxes, which were actually pretty close to one another. After a pair of guards threatened to pincer me at the stairs, I was able to cut both wires, and then immediately got spotted by this guard after I decided to just stop for some reason. Didn't help that the guard in question was right in front of a camera. A bad way to break stealth, but at least I got the wires cut, so I would be able to skip the barrier drilling objective and just focus on the door. Embarrassingly, I even got downed by this FBI agent even before the assault itself had started, clearly showing that my dodge chance might as well be 0. Still, the fact that I was able to get a head start on the drilling meant that I could get the server and slip out in just over 5 minutes, not even having to deal with a single sniper. Against my better judgment, I decided to celebrate reaching 250 in the crime spree by heading back to Cook-Off, and was rewarded by learning the hard way that these gangsters didn't care too much for my medieval weapons. Nothing of note really happened here, except for this bulldozer taking a fall after I'd stabbed him on his attempt to climb up the outer wall of the shack. After an egregious amount of waiting, Twitch arrived with the van in the middle of the assault, but I was able to secure all bags of meth, in spite of his efforts to make me go down. The modifier choices getting harder still, I decided to let Skulldozers join the fray. One reroll later, and I was back to the tried and true breakout mission yet again. It's repetition like this that makes me wish there were more heists included in Crime Spree. The likes of 4 stores, jewelry store, Election Day Plan C, Diamond Heist, Border Crossing, and even the recently added Midland Wrench and Lost in Transit heists would be interesting additions to help add a bit more variety to this game mode. Let me know which days of heists you'd like to see in Crime Spree. Anyway, with me winning my first Skulldozer duel, this mission was a straightforward endeavor once again. I even managed to get one over on the SWAT turret by downing its shield in just 2 critted arrows. Take that, technology. After rescuing my colleagues from a pair of cloakers, it was a simple run into the garage and making my way out of this mission yet again. Though, not before a little jeopardy, as I wasn't sure if my AI crewmates were actually going to revive me towards the end. My teammates could be so fickle sometimes. The next mission on my increasingly long hit list was Engine Problem, the ever infamous Big Oil Day 2. And I got caught less than a minute in. Brilliant. The clipboards provided me with an early answer for the engine itself. Because of it being a one-hose nitrogen engine, that immediately narrowed it down to Engine 1, so I wouldn't need to faff about finding the computer for the pressure value. The increasingly hard enemies were starting to become an issue when it came to defending the power boxes, but thankfully, even being super strong didn't make them immune to idiocy, as this taser decided to tase me a second time and took an exploding bolt to the face for his hubris. Eventually, I got into the basement, grabbed Engine 1 and deployed the smoke signal. I managed to pull some disrespect on this taser by sending him flying after his death, and once I got the engine on board, it was just a whole load of waiting for the confirmation and eventual escape. The outcome was never in doubt. Adding more bulldozers into the mix, I decided yet again to go back to cook-off. Having learned from my experiences, I decided to take the gangsters out with arrows this time, before beginning preparations with the search for the sets of boards. I was able to cook my 3 bags, wait for Twitch to show up, and made it out of there. At least he decided to wait for the assault to die out before he arrived this time. With that, I was at rank 300 in Crime Spree, and a long session of heisting would have to come to an end, as I slept for the 3rd day's work ahead. With the dawn of the 3rd day, I knew things were going to be at their hardest, and Link's first task of this day would be spent down in Florida. Yes, it was time for him to become a new brand of Florida man as he fights off highly trained armies of SWATs with just a bow and a Zweihander. It was with the introduction of counterfeit in this rotation that I came up with a new strat for handling this heist. I'd kill the first beat cop going down the stairs as per usual, but I'd shave off a few seconds of my quiet time by dominating his mates soon afterwards. The reason being is that this particular brand of beat cop has a Bronco revolver. With my Joker skills on hand, if I converted him, I'd have a powerful glass cannon ally on my side for a while. And given the second patrol coming, I'd have 2 of them with me for the initial assault, which would be helpful in disposing of some of the more problematic enemies. Now, this was my first counterfeit of the spree, so this strategy wasn't quite as optimized and refined as it could have been, but I could always refine it later. Plus, I did manage to get what I aimed for, and my faith in this newfound strategy was rewarded immediately as I got a front row seat of watching one of them blast this taser down with a clean headshot. Good stuff, Bronco Cop. Solid 7 out of 10 from you there. With that, it took the water valve objective for me to come under any kind of pressure. The game threw dozer after dozer at me, but I simply did not yield as I held the line. With the safe blown open, I grabbed the printing plates, blasted open my path to the sewers, and made my getaway. Even in spite of this taser face tanking one of my explosive bolts and downing me. Just as well Sydney was on hand to help me up and let me complete the run to the exit. Having learned of the optimal way to go about things, the 3rd FBI server mission was up next. Despite having the maximum concealment penalty from the modifiers, I didn't have that high a detection risk at all things considered. And with it, I was able to quickly detect the server room and the computer I needed to hack yet again. Which was then spoiled as I had a guard walk into the very room the computer was in, and my attempts to get him down simply flung him in view of the camera in the room, scuppering the idea of doing this heist quickly. Whoops. With me turning the Skulldozer into a hedgehog, I simply had to hold the line against the increasingly hard wave of enemies, grabbing the server and making a break for it. I took the long way round in hopes that I would be able to get leverage on that sniper, but no dice. At least I was able to take him out while on the floor with my pistol crossbow, so all I needed to do was wait for a revive, and the rest was history. Hard fought, but not impossible. Next up, I decided to tackle Watch Dogs Day 1. A simple enough mission that only needed 4 secured bags. Avoiding getting slaughtered by the beat cops on the initial ambush was really the toughest part of the early portion of this mission. Despite that, it was not going to be easy, especially after I was ready for this charge from a cloaker, only to be downed inches away from him kicking me down, forcing a mad scramble to stay up, which I couldn't really achieve under the laser eye of the SWAT turret, and then again to a skulldozer when trying to salvage the situation. This wasn't helped by the pickup deciding to go to the crane, the worst place it could be, especially when I went down with no more revives left and no medic bags to stock up on. Having to parkour my way past the locked gate and avoiding the cloaker ambush waiting for me, I started securing the bags as the assault was gone. My resources were starting to dwindle under the pressure of the SWAT turret and the cops below, soon only having my pistol crossbow to defend myself with. Eventually, I was able to make a mad dash for the armored escape, just scraping past in what was the closest to a second failure so far. Against my better judgment, I opted to put minigun dozers into the mix, before heading into the search once more. I went down trying to secure this Bronco lady, which just about set the tone for what was to come. Dozers were my kryptonite in this run, getting down by a skulldozer and a minigun dozer before having done the first task, and requiring some cross-corridor snipes to get past him. And then I went grey thanks to the Saiga dozer. Not the best of starts. But I had a plan. The assault was ending as I got the files I needed from the archives, so I decided to deliberately go into custody by rubbing my face up against this minigun dozer. And since the assault was down and I had 2 hostages, I was out of there faster than you could say, as long as you have enough rupees. From here, I could have defended a little better, as this run was giving me more keycards than I knew what to do with, so I could have shut one of the doors or even accessed the nearby infirmary to help myself, especially with having to make clutch Master Sword stabs against minigun-wielding bulldozers. Luckily, I was rewarded with another assault wave dying out, and being able to get traded back in quickly at the hands of this sniper. I was a little nervous here as I thought Duke was going to commit a war crime by executing my hostage, but thankfully, I was able to be traded back in and get revenge on the sniper. With another chance at life, I was able to get the master server, but having to deal with a fiercer assault wave than I had to deal with prior, was able to make my way out after many exploding bolts. So, how did I decide to follow that up? By jumping chronologically backwards into the breakout, of course. I had to use every trick I could to survive while doing the objectives due to how much everyone was starting to hurt now. Definitely pushing my crook build to its limits, especially since I had the misfortune of another SWAT van blocking the road. This tan unit then decided to commit a war crime himself by feigning his surrender. Thankfully his mate wasn't so keen on the idea of perfidy. Look that one up. The hack went by in a flash, and it was time to begin the armor removal process. And by the way, shout out to this cloaker. I know I got down by someone else, but I like to think that his little kick during the breakdance was what floored me here. Oh well, I was able to make my escape soon afterwards, so no harm, no foul. With Zeal Marksmen part of assaults now, it was time for another romp through Brooklyn Bank. Some precise parkour was needed to get up to the second floor and apply the saw, but I got the thermal drill once again, so this was going to be fairly straightforward in spite of the brutal assault that lay ahead. It was fairly routine though. I unloaded half of my quiver into the skulldozer, accidentally shot a civ in the head with an arrow during this meat grinder session, and knighted this minigun dozer. It was painful, and I was even briefly besieged in the vault, but I was able to get the medallion once again and slip back into the sewers, albeit with a closer shave with death than I would have liked. Next, I re-rolled my missions and decided to do car shop again. I had to be pacifist when it came to the guards since I had no more pages to work with, so I had to work with a little more guile than usual, but otherwise this wouldn't end up being too hard of a challenge for Link at this point. With a camera blocking my usual route and a guard on the stairwell, I had to detour through the ground floor offices to get to the stairs inside. But from there, it was easy, using my aim of Hawkeye on the manager and his assistant, hacking the computer, setting the C4, and making my getaway with over a minute to spare. Next up, another encore at Brooklyn Bank. And I got shredded by beat cops within 5 seconds. Lovely. At least I had the thermal drill once again, so it wasn't going to be too strenuous, hopefully. Not too much of note here. This medic had a fantastic dive after getting shot in the head. This taser tanked my Master Sword strike and ended up skewering himself with an arrow afterwards. and I took out a sniper that would otherwise have had a good clean shot on me, restocking on everything I needed. Otherwise, same as it ever was, since I have speedrunning Brooklyn Bank down to a science at this point. The choices were only getting harder in terms of loud modifiers. I eventually caved with getting more medics involved, more targets for me to prioritize I guess, before re-rolling my missions and getting lucky with another car shop, an easy enough mission to handle. Despite one of the worker civs shoving his head through a wall and alerting the arguing couple, it looked like an easy clear. But disaster. Another civ was alerted, and in my efforts to get to them, I alerted this guard. That meant the mission was now a race against time. Despite my best efforts to get through as quickly as possible here, it was all for naught. Even if I drove with the precision and speed of the late great Ken Block, I just couldn't prevent the heist's failure, and I was out of time less than 100 meters away from safety. That meant I had one stock left in the crime spree. With the problematic lab rats and slaughterhouses my other options, my only recourse was to go back into car shop and see if I could make it through. This one was much more successful, selecting a nice black Falco Genie to add to Link's collection. This ended up being surprisingly tense, as I teetered on the edge of failing for the third and final time by nearly pulling an Ace Ventura and coming close to rolling the supercar. But, as if Hylia herself was watching over this heist, I was back on four wheels and able to make the rest of my escape. Thank God for that. If that thing hadn't landed back on wheels, it would have been curtains. From burning rubber in DC to freezing my ass off in Alaska, my next choice was to head to Alaskan Deal. I got pretty lucky with the objectives, with the captain in the building closest to the ship and the diesel tank and the pump in easy enough positions to defend. In spite of my attempts to fail. The difficulty began to ramp up when it was time to go, with me getting peppered constantly in my attempts to undo the ropes holding the ship. My AI crewmates and my bow aim dragged me all the way to the ship defense objective, which proved to be incredibly tough, even going on to my final down. It definitely felt like I was taking my last stand, especially with the myriad of bulldozers on board. But, mercy of mercies, the assault eventually ended and I was able to leave. After the nightmare defending the ship, it only seemed right to suffer in prison nightmare immediately afterwards. After getting snipers as my question mark event, I was able to brute force a path into the prison, before giving me the Uno draw 4 of wheel spins by giving me a combination of dozers and snipers on the second wheel. Despite the firepower around me knocking me down near constantly, I was able to pull the clutch hits on the snipers, survive the onslaught, and make my run to the train. While the sniper was able to bring me down just before safety, I was quickly revived to get the rest of the way. This allowed me to take a much needed break once again. My only viable option was to turn shields into the Winters variety, as bad of an idea that sounded, before heading back into counterfeit. With my strategy laid out, I was able to carry out my kill and dominate method in spite of this piano playing couple. This time around though, I waited for the second pair of cops to head into the basement before striking, buying me a few more seconds of quiet time. But those shields were coming back to haunt me, though not before this minigun dozer kept shredding me in his bid to defend the water valve. It's at this point that I regretted not acing shock and awe to make dealing with shields that little bit easier, especially since they were now starting to spawn in large packs. Despite all of the pressure though, my strat ultimately paid off, with me getting the plates again and making my getaway in the sewers. Once again, I find myself taking on the breakout. This was definitely starting to become a case of trying to survive instead of just enjoying myself by this point. Not helped at all by rolling the SWAT van objective again, wasting even more time by keeping me within the range of death mobs. Then I decided, clearly needing that Triforce of Wisdom after all, to fire all of my arrows trying to take out this SWAT turret. This was less than ideal, leaving me with just my sword and my pistol crossbow for the final push. But I was able to pull through in the end despite my limited resources. I had now breached Crime Spree rank 400, and was beginning to wonder if this run would ever actually end. With tough choices on the cards for my modifiers, I decided that I simply had to resort to my arrows and my sword for taking on dozers, who were now immune to explosives. To test the waters on this newfound change, it was time for another transport park run. With money as my loot for this one, I actually wasn't pressured too much. Watching the shield vanish into thin air was definitely the highlight of this run, as I wasn't going to be losing to this heist anytime soon, cutting through the park to secure my goods and escape, with me putting in some archery practice on the minigun dozers while I waited for my teammates to catch up. After re-rolling my missions, I had to make a tough decision. Do I risk another car shop and potentially fail in stealth? Or do a cook-off and potentially fail in loud? I decided to roll with car shop. Despite my best efforts to get caught early on, I was able to make quick work of this heist. I was caught on the way out of the parking lot, but by that point, I had more than enough time to plant the C4, get into another Falco Genie, and make it out without any bloodshed. After another re-roll of bad options, White Christmas was the only one I could feasibly do in a reasonable time, and I found myself resorting to my makeshift distraction method to try and lobotomize a few attackers. At this point, my pistol crossbow was becoming largely ineffective in doing the jobs it was meant to, unless it was actually critting. Bringing Harud into the antenna this time, I was able to hold out and escape in the lumberyard soon after. My choice of modifier to celebrate reaching 420 was the obvious choice to give Cloakers handcuffs, before heading back to Brooklyn Bank once again. With the thermal drill being my breaching tool yet again, despite the pressure I took getting it into the bank, things were fairly routine. I ended up shooting this medic with what I could only assume to be a hidden ancient arrow given the way he just flat out vanished, another simple enough completion at this point. Next up was only the second trip to the standard bank heist, although this time I was effectively forced to go loud. Against my expectations, I was actually able to convert one of the first responder Bronco cops to my side, which definitely helped when the assault began 100 years later. It definitely kicked up a notch once it did begin though, with me making the decision to hide in the teller space where the shutters were closed. I was able to breach the vault eventually, pick up a money bag, and, with no resistance from snipers on the way out, escaping was surprisingly easy. Once again, I find myself on a train during interception, and immediately the cops weren't messing around by taking me out within 15 seconds. The biker boss was even more ruthless than before, but at least using melee skill-pumped swords with crits helps reduce the strain she takes on Link. On the way back, I thought it was curtains when I got downed on top of this carriage, but Duke was able to get me in time and allow me to finish my escape. Next up, it was round 3 on counterfeit, and another chance to use my tried and true strategy. Nothing to report here, didn't even go down once, a nice clean counterfeit run in just over 10 minutes. Not the same story for White Christmas however, as the cops here were much more relentless. Getting Harudin into the chopper wasn't too hard. The hard part was actually holding out until the escape came with no more downs to spare. But thankfully, the assault ended as the chopper arrived at the wreckage, allowing me to slink out. Just. This left me fleeing, once again, back to Florida. This time, I got a rather rare thing to occur. The drill on the safe had jammed, marking it the first time in quite a long while I had seen it do so. Aside from that, however, it was business as usual, escaping via the sewers once again. With only 2 modifiers left, I decided to implement medic dozers into the rotation and cross from East Coast to West Coast as I moved on to Aftershock. Everything on this heist was starting to hurt massively, having gone past the 450 mark earlier, and with snipers overlooking the vans, trying to stay alive was proving to be a real challenge now, with my attempts to thin out those long-range menaces proving difficult at the best of times. I was then put on the brink of custody and decided not to take chances and get the medic bag asset from an ambulance on the overpass. This ultimately proved to be a good move, as the C4 from Bile happened to drop only a few meters away from where I was, allowing me to pick that up quickly too. I then had the bright idea to try and use the pistol crossbow to launch these 400-pound saves into the truck. It went about as well as you'd expect. Then, horror. I went down again, and in a sense of deja vu from interception from yesterday, my crew were nowhere near me. Thankfully though, they were active and moving, but I was now at the mercy of the AI keeping my remaining hostages alive to keep the run going. This had interesting results, not least because I, for whatever reason, was stuck in what I like to call truck cam, forcing to watch from this position as Clover was fighting her own little war with the cops. Eventually, I was brought back, and was immediately greeted by getting dozed to death. Fantastic. The struggle to secure the last 5 safes was really starting to consume my resources. I was going down constantly and losing my first aid kits rapidly. With 1 down remaining and the endless assault activated, I decided to say screw it and let Link drive the safes to the construction yard to hold the line desperately. Partway through the holdout, I went grey again, and I was beginning to think that this was Link's true last stand. But a miracle struck yet again. With my AI crew defending fervently, I was just about able to hold out with my first aid supply completely diminished. Even still, I cut this very close, as I fumbled getting into the truck and was 1 shot away from going into custody. The very definition of a close call. With that, Los Angeles decided to miraculously fix itself in minutes despite being hit with a massive earthquake, as I took on Highland Mortuary once more at rank 473. The mood was set when, in my bid to get a convert, I got cuffed by this cloaker. From here, it was always an uphill battle, fighting against the tide of literal super soldiers with just my medieval tools of war. I was able to get Mr. Pink to safety and collect the sword to hopefully get the diamonds out. But this is where RNG can either give you a good time or the worst time possible. I ended up getting sniped from across the street by a minigun dozer in a bit of relevant foreshadowing before the big holdout, which proved to be strenuous. I went down again and again and again, chewing through all of my available resources just to stay alive. And RNG just wouldn't cooperate and give me the diamonds I needed. Ammo definitely would help, but I needed to simply brute force the objective if I wanted any chance of making it out. Eventually, with the last storage unit to open, came the diamonds. But by this point, the strenuous and painful holdout had taken its toll on Link. In his bid to cross the street to get back to the warehouse with the diamonds over his shoulder, he got sniped. And my crew AI, in typical sluggish crew AI fashion, was just a fraction too late to get the hero of Hyrule back onto his feet. I was now back at the mercy of the AI keeping my 1 hostage alive, but 15 seconds into the wait, Link's fate was sealed, as the hostage I had was shot down by the hands of Sydney, Link's own ally in this strange new world. Just like that, it was over. It had taken 473 ranks of crime spree, but Link had finally been slain by the cops. With that, Link takes his place in the 2nd highest tier ranking of this challenge, with my run ending at crime spree rank 473, having gained over 20 million XP to let me go infamous again, over $400 million in total cash across spending and offshore, and a newfound respect for the Plains Rider bow. What I thought would be a semi-joke build turned out to be a setup that was very viable for crime spree. Not the most optimal when it comes to speed, but certainly one that would help you stand your ground to get the results you want most. It'll definitely take grinding, but hey, when doesn't it? Thank you all so much for sticking it out this long. Throw us a like if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more like this, let me know who you think I should tackle in this format next, because this is a very interesting way to go about things. I do have a few in mind for this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts anyway. Anyway, this video has gone on for way too long for something that was meant to ring in my content for 2023, so I'm gonna head off now. Throw us a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more content, and I'll see you on whatever I put out next. Take care now.